Hello there! I am Scorched Scales, and around a week ago, I started reading Moon Rising. It's called Moon Rising, right? I think it's called Moon Rising. Hold on, it's right under my bed. What's this book called? I'm pretty sure it's Moon Rising. Yes, Moon Rising. Who would have thought? For a book that has a character called Moon Watcher in it, has moon in the title. But actually, all jokes aside, I actually like how for some of the titles of the books it actually includes the name of the character. I think that's cool. It's nice and memorable. It does make me a little bit upset that like book 10 isn't called Ghibli, the Destroyer of Worlds. So yes, over the last week, I've been reading Moon Rising, and I finished it last night. And what did I think of it? I loved it. I loved this book. If you watched my previous video, you would know that my ranking for the books is like this. At number 5, for me personally, it's The Lost Heir. For number 4, it's The Dragonette Prophecy. For number 3, it's The Hidden Kingdom. For number 2, it's The Dark Secret. And at number 1, it's The Brightest Night. And I'm not going to delve into any of the reasons here because I spent an hour rambling about it last week. So, where would I place Moon Rising on this ranking? Yes. I loved it that much. And for the visuals for this video, I'm going to be drawing Moon. But this isn't the first time I've drawn Moon, because a couple days prior, I drew a version of Moon. And here it is. Just for the record, I didn't trace this. This is 100% my own work, and I'll be using this as reference throughout the video so I can see what I'm doing right or wrong. I am incredibly surprised that I managed to draw this, considering the last thing I drew, I traced, so I didn't really draw it, and the last thing I drew without tracing was this. Like, how is this possible? Okay, so first off, I'm just going to get my critiques out of the way first, so I can spend the rest of the time gushing about this book. I have 2 critiques with this book. One of them is an actual problem with it from my point of view, and one of them is more of a nitpick. As for the major issue, once again, this is like the 3rd time this has happened in the series, where something isn't really foreshadowed. I'm specifically referring to Sora, how it's revealed how I believe she was the dragon behind the bombing. Now this may change on a reread, where I could pick up on some stuff that might have been foreshadowed earlier. But to my memory, Sora was barely mentioned before she was revealed to be the dragon who did it. Because the only mention of her I remember is that I think she was in the library when Moon walked in. And of course, she was in the winglet that was alongside the main group in history class. But besides that, I don't remember a thing about Sora. But yeah, again, as I just mentioned, this could very easily just be me not picking up on stuff. That's the more major story issue that I have with this, and even then it's not really that big of a problem due to how much I love everything else in this book. But as for the tiny nitpick, I will admit I am a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to encounter Glory in this book, because we get to encounter every other member of the Dragonets of Destiny. We encounter Clay, Tsunami, Starflight, Sunny. And like, yeah, it makes sense why Glory wouldn't show up, because she's got 2 tribes to look after. But like, I would have liked it if she appeared at Jade Mountain before the end. Because it really just felt like it was kinda incomplete without her. Because like, you have every other member of the DoD and like, except Glory? Really? But hey, that isn't really a story issue, that's more just a what I want to see issue. Now, on to what I loved about this book. Basically everything! It's surprising because nothing really that significant happens in the book until like the latter half of it. But yet, I found myself being engaged in nearly every single page. For most of this book, it is generally just hanging out. But I think it's great here. And that plot twist at the end where, like, yeah, it's revealed that Sora was behind all of this. In my mind, I was like, so it's Sora who's been communicating with Scarlet. Sora is the source of everything. But no, it turns out there's two killers here. Because we had Sora, who was trying to kill Icicle because Icicle killed her sister in war. And we have Icicle, who's trying to kill the Dragonette of Destiny, so she can free her brother. Like, I was fully expecting there to just be like one source of this, but no, it's two. I really like that. I did not see that coming. Now, on to the characters. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I really like Moon, because I find her POV, like, really interesting, because due to her mind-reading powers, she sees the world differently. She sees everything that's going on inside someone's head. She views people as, like, a book to read. I just find her POV really interesting, and her mind-reading powers. This is probably unintentional, but I could see a lot of neurodivergent people, people with mental disabilities like particularly autism, relating to Moon. Now, I'm not going to get into too much detail in here because of private stuff, but I have a lot of experience interacting with autism, and Moon is like a scarily accurate, well, not really accurate, but like, it's a oddly coincidental stand-in for having autism. Like, the main standout to me is that some autistic people, their ears work differently basically, because as humans, over time, our ears have evolved to basically isolate background noise so we can focus to what's in front of us. That's something that we have evolved over time for communication reasons and probably for surviving in the wild thousands of years ago. But a lot of autistic people basically don't have that. They don't have that ear filter because their ears don't adjust volume for their mind. So everything around them is at an equal, loud level to where it can become very overwhelming to them. And this is scarily similar to what happens to Moon and her mind-reading powers, because she often finds her mind-reading at first in like the first half of the book to be like very overwhelming, because no matter where she goes, she can hear everybody's thoughts. Her mind isn't able to isolate what's going on around her to where it can become very overwhelming to her and affect her socialization with people. And like, that specific part is almost one-to-one from what I can see. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if like a lot of neurodivergent people out there really related to Moon. So yeah, that will probably be a topic that I revisit sometime in the future. So yes, I really like Moon as a protagonist. I like her POV. I like how people could interpret her character and her progression throughout the story. So yeah, it's safe to say that I really like her character. Which I can very clearly tell because currently, I have been recording for 26 minutes, and I've only talked about Moon. Now, a issue that I had in the previous books, specifically in 3 and 4, when it came to the side characters, I didn't really have that much to say about them. But here, I have at least something to say about every side character here. I am aware that Kibli, he's like the fan favorite. He's the character that everybody loves. Like, yeah, I like him. I like his mindset. I like how we see his thought process in the books. Because for a lot of characters, their thoughts are not simple, but they're very condensed. But like for Kibli, you have him going through lots of options in his head. You basically get his entire thought process. And like, I find that really interesting to see how differently he thinks as a character. So yeah, I can very easily see how this guy could end up becoming somebody's favorite character, because not only because of the intriguing way he thinks, but also because he's genuinely just a really nice guy. I just noticed there is a giant spider moving around my room. I'm currently frozen in fear. Oh, it's moving around. Oh, Jesus Christ. This is how I die. Then moving on to Winter. He's a prick. Well, at least for most of the story, he's a prick. But by the end, he truly not really comes out of the shell. He just really proves who he really is. I did find his little intriguement with scavengers to be very interesting, because they're like, huh, weird. Out of all of the characters, to have a interest in scavengers, it's Winter? I would not have guessed that. Once again, I think Winter is a character who I'm very intrigued to see how he changes across the series, because it seems like that a significant part of his character here is his heritage, is his family. Because like, in this book, he spends most of his time going, I'm the nephew of Queen Glacia, move out of my way, peasant! So yeah, I'm very intrigued to see how a character like that, a character who at first doesn't really seem that likable, comes across when we are seeing from his point of view. And then there's Kinkajou. Now, I'll fully admit, in book 3, I didn't really have that much to say about Kinkajou, other than she was a cool, tough kid. But here, she basically seems like the more young, social, more outgoing character out of the lot, who never stops talking to either herself, to the dragons around her, and specifically to Moon, which did lead to a few funny interactions between the two. And I feel like I have been on both sides of that conversation. Then there's Turtle. Now, as for Turtle, he's a odd character for me to get my head around, because based on his introduction, I interpreted him as like, ooh, this is the shy guy. This is the guy who doesn't like to talk a lot. But this may be a effect of me listening to the audiobook. But like, his character didn't really come across that way. Because when I read his dialogue, he came across a lot more confident. Which is odd, because I expected him to be like small, shy and reserved. Or that could become his main character trait throughout the rest of the books. And then we had Carnelian. I liked Carnelian. Well, she wasn't a particularly kind fellow, I'll say, but she was an interesting character. And then she blows up. I was not expecting that. She became bloody, fried chicken. Sora became a chef. She cooked crispy Nightwing and burnt Skywing. the two finest meals in Pyria. A royal delicacy. I can see it now. Jade Academy on Kitchen Nightmares. And you just have Gordon Ramsay chewing into Sora because of her cooking. and you look on the table, and it's just like an entire dragon. And like Gordon Ramsay isn't concerned that, oh, this dragon killed another dragon. Instead he's like, you didn't cook the tail right, you fucking knobhead. Now, there is this one other major character who I have yet to mention. Darkstalker. Now, before going into this arc, I knew that Darkstalker was basically the main villain. But like, throughout reading this book, is he really that bad? Like, this is just the first book. I have yet to really see who this character is. But like, from what I've seen, he doesn't really seem like that bad of a guy yet. Also, just a genuine question here. When am I supposed to read Darkstalker? Because I had somebody recommend me reading it before Arc 2. I heard people recommend reading it after Winter Turning, but release date wise, it came out before Darkness of Dragons. So like, when do I read it? But you lot are going to have to answer that in the comments, because I've received different answers and I don't know who to listen to. I also found myself being very intrigued by the setting. But before going into the book, I was like, this takes place in a school? I'm not sure if I like this setting. But by the end of the book, I ended up being a little bit disappointed that they're leaving Jade Academy, because I was like, no, I want to see more of this place, please? And something interesting that happened to me for like the first few chapters of the book. I don't know if this happened to anybody else, but while I was reading the book, I ended up feeling the same as Moon did, because due to this being the first time that Moon has like really been surrounded by a lot of dragons, she's feeling very overwhelmed due to all the thoughts going on inside her head. And like, throughout the first few chapters in the book, I started feeling very overwhelmed as well. Like, stuff just kept on constantly happening, to where I was feeling overwhelmed just like Moon was. Now, this may sound like a bad thing, but it isn't. Because the author, either it be intentionally or unintentionally, was able to make me, the reader, feel the exact same emotion as the character was. And like, that's a major goal of storytelling, to make the audience, in this case the reader, feel the same way as the character does. And Toei did that very effectively, at least to me. And just one more thing that I want to note on here before I sign off. But this book made me realise a problem that I had with the Dragonette Prophecy. A critique that I now have looking back on the first book. It's that in the cave, we don't really have a scene of the characters connecting to each other before they break out of the cave. Because it doesn't really feel like that there was a scene where they all gather around and just banter with each other. To have both us as an audience get attached to their relationships to each other and to establish their dynamics with each other. But here, that fixes that. That fixes that a lot. Most of this book is characters establishing their relationships with each other, creating their dynamics, and getting the audience to care about who they are and the feelings that they have for each other. Most of the book is that. So yeah, just one book in, and I can already see a major improvement for me from the previous arc. And we're one book in already. And this book has already topped most of the previous arc in my opinion. So like, how good is the rest of the arc? Like, I've heard really good things about the rest of the arc. And like, if the rest of the arc is like around this level, this might very easily end up becoming my favorite arc. So yes, those were my thoughts on Moon Rising. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But as for my thoughts on Winter Turning, you're gonna have to wait for that, because I have not read that yet. And as for the actual artwork, this feels like a downgrade to me, because I personally prefer the drawing I did off camera to the one that I did here. I prefer the more chibi style that I drew than I did to the more realistic one that I did unintentionally. I prefer the colours on the one that I just did, but I prefer the actual drawing, the actual outline, the actual style of the one that I did off camera. And as you may have seen for this video, I really struggled with the mouth of Moonwatcher. So that's something that I definitely need to work on off camera. So yeah, I somehow went backwards. So yeah, now that's really all I have to say. So, I guess I'll see you another day. See ya.